Hello, and welcome to the Future Shapers podcast brought to you by the Spaceship Academy. My name is Todd Gimble. I'm one of the co-founders of the Spaceship Academy, and this is our first podcast, the Future Shapers. Very excited to be with you, and we hope that this becomes an ongoing thing that you like and enjoy and learn from, and we will have interesting and exciting guests. And you can find this podcast on our website, TheSpaceship.ai, or on any place where you find your podcast, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all over the place. We're going to be everywhere, and we want you to listen, watch, like, subscribe, and tell your friends about it. Very excited today in our premiere episode to have with us one of my co-founders with the Spaceship. In fact, one of the original co-founders of the Spaceship, Craig Vezina. Craig, it's great to have you here on the first podcast.
Hey, Todd, it's great to be with you. Excited for this new initiative that you're launching, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think so. You know, you and I met a couple years ago. We have very different backgrounds, which we'll get into more about as we move forward. But we were linked kind of by the common thought that we want to do something that leaves this world or gets this world into a better place. We're both very interested in sustainability, in ESG and all the things around that. And I have a corporate background, which we'll talk about at some point, but you have a very different background from me. And I'd like to start by having you talk a little bit about yourself. Let me first say that I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. And Craig is coming to you from his home in Paris, France. So, Craig, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got here to the spaceship.
Absolutely. So, as you can tell from my voice, I am an American, but I have been living abroad really since I began my professional career. My story is a little bit strange. I think I grew up in the small area of New Hampshire, beautiful lakes region and mountain region, and went to college not too far away in Maine, and just felt like at age 22, what I really wanted was to see the world. I loved home, but I needed to see a bigger world, and I was able to catch on teaching in international schools. And as you may know, in every major city around the world, there's an expat community, and they have families, and schools are needed. And so these international schools are really quite amazing for lots of reasons. And one of them is that you have young people from all around the world with really rich perspectives and experiences in your classroom. And I loved it so much that I ended up spending nearly 20 years in international education. 18 of those years were at the American School of Paris, and I was able to enjoy that until 2016, when this idea of sustainability and the opportunity really with technology to help people and planets towards a better tomorrow really kind of drove me into this entrepreneurship world. And so it's how we eventually came together and are doing the work that we're doing. But I still feel very much like an educator at heart, and I probably always will. But now it's more in the realm of, businesses and how we can help businesses, create that future that we're all hoping for.
Awesome. Well, I can vouch for the international school background. I know when I was living in Singapore, my son went to one of the American schools there. And I'm sure as a teacher, very similar to as a student in those environments, it's fascinating because you have kids and teachers and staff from all over the world. I remember when my son was in, I think, second grade, he had 30 kids in his class, and they were from 25 countries. And what better way for Americans who are generally a little more insular and don't go anywhere to kind of be exposed to so many different types of cultures and different backgrounds and people from countries that are advanced or not quite advanced or developing. That perspective, I think, gives both students and faculty, an interesting view of the world that you're not going to get if you never left New Hampshire, or for me, I've never left Milwaukee, where I'm from. So
Exactly.
that's really
Yeah.
cool.
And one of the coolest things was not just, how we're different, but also how we can grow up in totally different worlds and cultures and environments and still get excited about the same things and care about a lot of the same things, and just basically how much we have in common as well.
Yeah. And I think to your point of becoming more into the sustainability world and the entrepreneurial world, again, you probably were exposed to lots of kids who had parents who were doing all sorts of amazing different things. And it gives you some interesting ideas about how to broaden your own horizons. So tell me, what was your first move kind of outside of being in an institution, not institutionalized, but in an
Yeah.
institution, working to kind of get into the entrepreneur world? What kind of sparked you, and what was the first thing you did to kind of move into that zone?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the honest answer is I was teaching entrepreneurship. So I was dean at the American School of Paris during my last 4 years there, but I was also teaching entrepreneurship. And as someone who is always looking for kind of that sparkle in students' eyes, like what is it that gives them energy? What is it that, excites them? Like entrepreneurship is such an amazing opportunity in education because it really is like, what are my personal passions and interests? What are the real world issues that I care about? How can I solve a problem for people that also potentially I could make a living from? But it wasn't so much about the making a living piece that we focused on. It was more like, okay, there are all these complex problems out there. What are some creative ways that we can approach them? And I fell in love with it. And it kind of it was one of those things that I was thinking about in the shower and thinking about, and I just realized, this is becoming my passion. And also I think at age 40 or so, um, I was thinking maybe, I love education, but maybe there's a different type of educational journey that I can go on, and that's been my journey since.
And what was your first kind of pivot into, the external world? I know a spaceship was not your first stop. Tell me a little bit about like what got
Yeah.
you, out the door into like being your own kind of person looking at things like this.
Yeah. So in the spirit of learning by doing, in 2016, I launched a nonprofit in California called Z School, the International School of Social Entrepreneurship, which was designed to help young people use the skill sets of entrepreneurship towards whatever problems in their communities most interested in them. And that nonprofit is still very much alive, but the nonprofit world is very different from the startup world, as you know. And I also was asked around that same time, 2016, 2017, to help launch a startup here in Paris that was more in the extended reality space. So augmented reality, virtual reality. I was very excited to get on board. I saw the potential, especially with education for this immersive media. And so our company called Realcast launched, is the first cohort in an amazing startup campus here in Paris called Station F. And some people may have heard of it, but it's this old train station in Paris that has been converted into the world's largest startup campus. And so the model is really interesting. You have deep tech companies there. There's a heavy focus not only on XR, but on artificial intelligence, on blockchain, but also a structure where the entrepreneurs, the co-founders are learning, how to basically build a business in all of the elements that means, whether it's the marketing side, whether it is the um, uh, suite of SaaS solutions that are out there, and the business model side, et cetera. So it was really like going to get an MBA, being involved in that. But what happened with Realcast is we did some amazing projects with museums in Paris, still going, and the company is really in a good place. But in XR, as you may know, education is not quite there with XR. but video games are. And so our company has sort of pivoted in that direction. Therefore, I didn't have a lot of value to bring day to day. And the spaceship grew out of, my desire to bring education to people in a way that is highly relevant to them, that is highly relevant to their business. And that's always been where my heart is relevant, hands-on education.
Great, great. No, that is fascinating, and I think the experience you had with Realcast, definitely from going to nonprofit to profit, probably is the perfect pivot to get you from point A to where you are now. And maybe tell us a little bit how you came upon the spaceship, what it looked like at the beginning, how you kind of linked up with it, and a little bit about where it's gone to.
Yeah, like for so many people, I think COVID was a time when we kind of took a step back and rethought some things. And for me, I mentioned the nonprofit and the work that we were doing. COVID was a very clear. It didn't plant the seed because I think about this way before, but a very clear statement that brick and mortar, human to human education, although it'll always be valuable, is only a portion of what education actually is. And if you want to have impact at scale, you need to have engaging digital content and media as well. And so I think it was 2021 when I learned about the spaceship and its model, which we should talk about because it's very innovative. But at that point, it was like, yeah, this is perfect. This is a match made in heaven.
And how did you go about it? I know you weren't the initial founder, but you kind of signed on. Maybe give us a little background on that, because I think in this first episode, it's great to get that origin story about who the spaceship is, where we are. And then in future episodes, we're going to have some amazing people who have become associated with us at the spaceship. I think this base is really important information. So how did you kind of find it? How did you get recruited? Was it already there?
Yeah, it's funny. I wasn't looking, and that's why I really had to do a double take when I saw it. I was on LinkedIn, and just randomly LinkedIn said, the spaceship is the latest company from Jumanji Studios. And so I did some investigating. What is Jumanji Studios? Well, it turns out it's one of the most innovative impact hubs and incubators in Asia. And born in Singapore, I guess about 8 years ago, they basically bring startups from sort of ideation stage to an MVP, minimum viable product stage. And in very, very smart people involved in, those beginning sort of whiteboard sessions and getting it, kind of refined and very experienced entrepreneurs. But then once they have something that's real, then they look for the CEO. And so it was amazing that here I was thinking, for my nonprofit, I'd like to build out this really dynamic catalog of bite-sized videos that can take people along the impact entrepreneurship journey. And, kind of thinking, how much would that cost to put together? How would I do that? And with the spaceship, I found they had already done that. And I'd never heard of any other company anywhere that was thinking along those lines at the time. And so, Laura Francois, who's an incredibly talented and gifted impact entrepreneur herself, also a really talented teacher. So she basically was the mastermind behind this catalog. And after putting it together, it was right around the same time that COVID was coming to an end. That's when the spaceship was ready to hire a CEO. And
Great. Well, I know we're going to be getting into it as this podcast develops, but we have now got folks called Spaceship Fellows who are subject matter experts, and we've got 18 of them already, and they work with us on various projects. And Laura Francois, who pivoted away from the spaceship for a little while, has now come back to us and is one of our fellows. So I guarantee you she will be on a future episode of the podcast. So you signed on as CEO. I know from myself coming in a little later that you started kind of the spaceship moving in one direction, and we've kind of pivoted a little bit, but not losing the essence of what you're trying to do. Maybe explain a little bit about where you first looked and then how we've kind of taken the organization and pivoted a little bit, and where we've kind of landed now.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to be clear on terms. So when we talk about impact entrepreneurship, it's very much aligned with a concept like social entrepreneurship, which maybe is more commonly used. But we call it impact entrepreneurship because social entrepreneurship is helping people, which is extremely important, but also how can we help the environment and our planet more broadly. So that was always the type of entrepreneurship that interested me. And in order to do that, you also have to have some grounding in what are these sustainability issues, right? So what was our journey? We had this incredible catalog, and an award-winning catalog. Soon after I took over as CEO, we received the top tier impact award at Davos for education and media. So it's a really robust catalog, which we've used in really valuable ways. But the initial vision of it was kind of like masterclass, that we could go B2C, and that individuals who are interested in this could basically subscribe or sign up for a course, except it wouldn't be just the videos, it would be a cohort-based approach, which is essential, I think, for meaningful learning. It's very, very rare that just through e-learning alone, there's much deep learning taking place. In fact, statistics will tell you about 5% of e-learning courses ever even get completed. Not even to speak of, what is retained and all of that. So we always needed to have the people-to-people piece, but this scalable digital catalog was amazing. And so we thought we could, try to test a strategy going B2C with this. And that really was our key learning is impact entrepreneurs may be interested in this stuff, but they're difficult client base to reach, first of all, and to extract money from. So what we also realized, I would say after about 12 months into my tenure, is sustainability, sometimes framed as ESG, is a very real pain point for businesses. And innovation and innovation mindsets are essential to thinking about sustainability as well. So that's when the spaceship really turned a corner. And that's when you and I began to work together in earnest, when we moved away from a B2C social entrepreneurship education model to more of a helping businesses achieve sustainability goals and, educating professionals across industries. That's when the spaceship really found its lane. And that's how we're growing today.
That's great. And I can say that when I came on board and we started to make that kind of just adjustment to focusing more on businesses who really have the need to upskill their own folks and people outside their suppliers. And I think we realized that all the great work that you guys had done prior to that time still was 100% relevant to what we wanted to do. And that's kind of where we kind of turned a little bit of a corner, but without losing the essence of what the spaceship was. Hey, you're listening to the Future Shapers podcast brought to you by The Spaceship, our premiere episode. I'm Todd Gimble. I hope that you're enjoying it so far. We've got a little more to go here with Craig Vezina, but please, if you're listening to us, like us, follow us. We're going to be found in all the places where you find your podcasts, and we promise to keep these podcasts interesting and engaging, and hopefully every time you listen to one of our podcasts, you will walk away with something new and something interesting and a way to kind of maybe think about things and act in a certain way. So still here with Craig. He was just telling us how the spaceship has kind of pivoted from a B2C model to a B2B model, and that's kind of where I came on board. So all this stuff that we were just talking about, although I know it, I love hearing it again because it's a history that happened before I came on board. I come out of the corporate world. So when I joined with Craig and the guys from Jumanji, we started to kind of tailor some of our offerings more towards a corporate crowd, but with the thought of giving corporates an option of using a small bespoke startup to do some of their training and education, as opposed to potentially going to one of the big consulting firms that, charges tons of money and does a lot of different things, most of them well, but they're not focused on one thing. And this education piece is something that I've learned as a former corporate guy is something that you really want specific expertise coming in, as opposed to just general corporate, consultants who can kind of help you with anything. And that's kind of, I think, where we started to build out where we are today. So maybe, Craig, tell us a little bit about, since I came on board, a few of the things that we've done, how we've kind of proved our concept that what we do is workable and works. And then maybe the next step of how we've added AI to our repertoire of what the spaceship can do. So maybe walk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fortuitous when we met Todd because the timing was kind of right aligned with what I was just describing in our pivots and your experiences talking about how, building an ESG program really depends on a common understanding, a common language, really helping people understand the why of what they're doing, et cetera. And so, from firsthand experience that is difficult for organizations. So you can have experts in sustainability, but if it's really going to be a part of the culture, how do you widen that circle? How do you broaden that base? And so that's really kind of where we've honed in. And our clients have been diverse in many, many different, stages along the road. We have found, for example, with a major bank that we worked with in Asia last year, that they're really interested. First of all, that they see the need for sort of the sustainability upskilling, and if we can make it really relevant to their jobs, then they're invested. And so the way that we approach work is, a little bit of the conceptual stuff, but a whole lot of, okay, what does this mean when you're making this type of decision? What does this mean when you're making this type of decision, et cetera? And so there's been some nice validation in terms of our assumptions.
Yeah, I know from my own experience in a big company putting together the ESG program that, of course, you need to rely on a lot of different people because a program consists of your carbon footprint, your social, your human rights policies. It's very broad what goes in to having a sustainability plan or program. It's setting goals and all the things you need to do as an organization. And while you may have one or two people who are the chief sustainability officer and people who do that as their job, who are already like believers because they wouldn't be doing this type of work if they didn't really believe in it. But then you've got all these other people who need to be part of the process, who it isn't necessarily their job, and it's not why they came to work at this company. And I think that what we learned in the early days of the spaceship doing beta tests with more, corporate type people is once you get people who are from various different backgrounds and functions in an organization to personally understand why we're doing this and what the effect is going to have on both their business and on the planet and on their families and on their communities. Once you get them over that threshold, then they are not only good about participating, but they're eager to participate and they want to participate. Whereas if you just send an email to somebody in procurement saying, I need all the electric bills for the last 5 years from our factories, most companies, the person's going to say, that's not my job, dude. Stop asking me that. You got to get them to understand why. And while younger generations kind of have this whole idea baked in a little more because they've been in the world where sustainability is a thing, folks my age and generation behind me, you kind of have to get people to the table and give them a personal stake in it. And I think that's one of the things we're trying to do. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you hit a nerve a little bit at the end there. So I want to make sure I answer the question. But I just want to speak to the nerve first. Like, I remember when I was in high school, and I learned for the first time. My favorite teacher was a social studies teacher, and he shared with us some statistics. And he was actually, I'm pretty sure he was a Republican, like many people in New Hampshire at the time. But he was
Free is
sharing,
independent, live free or die.
yeah. Well, but he was sharing a book called The State of the World, which is a very sort of fact-based, universally, agreed upon report on key indicators. And I remember this is 1991, right? He was talking about, for example, methane being produced from livestock, cattle in particular. And I was like, what is this? It piqued my interest. Like, what is this? Why is it like, this sounds like a joke? Like, what is it? Talking about deforestation, talking about so this was back in the early 90s. And I remember like these statistics alone, without any political commentary, were alarming to me. And so alarming to me, even though sustainability questions were never something that I had really thought a lot about or talked about at home. So alarming to me. I remember I wrote my college essay on the topic, like how this is really important that we start thinking about this. So I kind of feel, and I have 4 kids, so I test this every once. I kind of feel like not much has changed, honestly, in 30 years. I don't think our schools are doing a great job of helping young people or teachers understand like what are the actual sustainability challenges of our time. And I certainly don't think it's in our discourse, our public discourse. If you followed the last election, you didn't hear any conversation really about the, planetary boundaries or some of the existential problems of our time. So I just, I think there's a need. There's always been a need, and probably less of a need now than before. But the need is still so huge and urgent that that's one of the only things that I get really anxious about is like we don't have that much time to kind of start speaking the same language about some of this stuff. And so your original question, I know, wasn't that.
That's okay. No,
But
you went on a good
it's
rabbit hole.
it's me in a good way, right?
But I think your point is, it does go to my original question, which was, personal why, that people cross a threshold. And you did it in 91 with this professor, kind of raised questions that put this in your mind. For me, I think it didn't truly come to mind until much later in my career when I was starting to read more and live around the world and travel in developing countries and see the pollution and some of the things that were going on there and say, wow, I've lived in a bit of a bubble where, I live in a nice clean neighborhood, everything's cool. I don't see this as a problem. But when I started to see how other countries are and other cultures are, and started to read more about the science behind global warming, and then you start to get worried and you start to realize that, lucky for me, I'm an older guy and hopefully, things are going to be fine the rest of my life, but I've got kids and their kids are going to have kids, and things are not moving in a direction which seems to be setting them up to have the benefit of all the good, pristine parts of the world that we've had growing up in our generation. So
Yep.
now's the time to do something. And I think when I heard what you guys were doing at the spaceship, and I came on board and said, we need to take this to the corporate world, I wasn't thinking of it because we can make more money. I was thinking of it from if you try to get people one at a time, which ultimately you do have to get people one at a time, but why not try to get them one at a time as part of a bigger organization? Because a big organization has the ability to really make an impact more than me putting my cans in the recycling bin. And that's good too. You got to do the individual stuff. But if you have a Fortune 500 company that sets carbon reduction goals and that has a human rights policy and that starts to get to where they're taking action in their much bigger footprint than any human, one person, and then they start to bring their circle in, like their suppliers and others, which is starting to happen, not as fast as we'd like, but that's where the real impact is going to happen. And I think we at the Spaceship, by focusing on those people, can help kind of speed that process or ease that process so that it moves a little faster because people are more informed and more enlightened.
Yes, well said. And you know, very much to this point of urgency as well, that technology has given us the opportunity now to do things that we never before thought were possible. So to go back to our earlier example, if we train 300 people at a bank, we're there for probably 20 contact hours, but we don't retain everything that we learn. We don't necessarily remember it 6 months later. And also, regulations might change, facts on the ground might change, new understandings come about. And so how can we provide upskilling in a way that is more ongoing, continuous, self-improving, and also on demand, right? Because
Right.
even we love the cohort model, but getting everyone in the room or even online at the same time poses its own constraints, right?
True.
So that's why it was about a year ago, I suppose now, Todd, that we said we're bringing on a CTO. We want to find someone who is really top of the pyramid in terms of understanding what AI does well, what it doesn't do well, what the research tells us, and very, very importantly, where this is going. We want to be able to see a year from now, 2 years from now, to the extent possible, because nobody could possibly predict where we're going to be in 12 months. But, we found somebody, and she found us, who is absolutely perfect in helping us build some exciting tools.
So tell me a little. So we have all of this great asynchronous stuff that we have in the library, but we also build more every day. We have the ability to do live training. And as you mentioned, when we trained the big bank in Singapore, the fascinating thing about that was there were several hundred people in several cohorts. And because of what probably we learned during COVID, we were able to do this really amazing training where I was sitting in Los Angeles, you were in Paris. We had experts in different parts of the world. The learners were in Singapore, Indonesia, India, Taiwan. So we had people all over the world. We were training them in a very engaging way that wasn't just them watching some video at their desk like I used to do in the corporate world and doing other stuff and every once in a while pushing a button. We kind of gave proof that that type of concept works. So tell me a little bit about why that worked and then how integrating AI, how are we looking at AI as something to enhance what we're trying to do as opposed to take over what we're trying to do?
Yeah, it's really tricky at the moment talking about AI, because as soon as you say it, people bring their own experience, their own context, their own assumptions into it. But so that's why I say that, because I want to give you mine. So I've been interested in artificial intelligence for a long, long time, and it is, I think, incredibly much more diverse than we commonly think about it. And I know you sometimes are using ChatGPT and Perplexity and other tools. There are certain questions that there are just really, it's uncanny how good they are at answering this type of question, right? But the more you use AI, the more you see that they each have their own limitations, and some have serious limitations, and some also just outright hallucinate, right? They give you junk.
Right.
And So one of the things that we discovered in our process, bringing on our CTO Sruti, and in the 10 months that she's been with us so far, is for complex questions related to sustainability, it needs to be well, and beyond sustainability, but let's just say for sustainability, it needs to be human centered. We need human experts who are helping us to design these, helping us to test and refine these tools. And if you can do that, then there is an incredibly exciting ceiling for AI, building AI tools for education. But the whole architecture of it, the design process, is got to be very, very thoughtful, and so we're committed to that. But the problem again that we're trying to solve is there's a huge existential crises in a number of fronts along very interdisciplinary, complex subject matters. And people are extremely busy, and so how do you do something that can not only take them where they are to where they want to go, but do it in a way that is convenient and practical? So that's sort of where we're imagining the huge impact over the next few years, is in taking something like, as you mentioned with the bank, something that is much more to face, and capturing all of that and then some with the world's leading experts, training tools on a wide spectrum of sustainability topics.
And that's fascinating, because I think what sometimes happens, or a lot of times happens, is you go through a training of some kind, or you go to a seminar, or you listen to a webinar, and you pick something up, and you're going to get some tidbits out of it. You may not get 100% of what they were trying to convey, but once it's over, you don't really have access to those people anymore, or to those experts. And, when you're in college, you can maybe, because especially like you went to a small school, so did I, you can go to the professor after class and ask him or her some more questions. You're in a community where they're there. But if you're sitting in, Taiwan, and you just did an 8-hour thing with the spaceship, yeah, you could email me or you or whoever else, but wouldn't it be great if there were some tool that kind of was available after the training or during the training with the same expertise, maybe even more in it, built into it, in a very specialized way that you can have access to continue to answer questions and to build upon your knowledge. And I think that is kind of what we're looking at with the Spaceship AI.
Yep, exactly.
And I know that go ahead.
Well, just to say, like our first use cases are also we're writing papers, and we're sharing and engaging with the research community, and we're really excited about the feedback that we've had so far. But I think our CTO, you'll have her on, I think, the next episode, Todd, Sruti. She's truly amazing, but one of her specialties and the focus of her dissertation at Oxford is on also this interaction layer. So it doesn't matter how great an AI tool may be, if it doesn't invite and encourage and take the user along, some meaningful, journey. If it's fully dependent on the user asking the right questions, then it's going to be inadequate.
Right.
Because
and you may not
have
the user doesn't know the right questions.
they don't know,
necessarily. You need
and
help.
they
Yeah.
have other things going on, and it's just not going to happen. We know that. So that's also something that we're especially excited about.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well, not only as the host of the podcast, but as the co-founder of the Spaceship. And I can say that, I've started to use AI more. It's kind of an extension of using like Siri or one of those type things. And what I'm finding is that with the products that are out there, if I don't take what they give me and really look at it and even do some additional research, I can't just take what they give me and copy it and use it, because I just don't have that confidence, because it's very general and it may go off on a tangent. And as you said, once in a while, it even glitches and gives you stuff that's just totally not true, because it's pulling from the internet, where facts aren't always the most important thing about what people put their content out there. this work that Sruthi's doing is a way to not only filter out some of the fake news and the inconsistencies, but also to add in some very customized content that experts provide to kind of educate the AI, which is really fascinating. And again, I'm learning by working with you and with her. This is like out of my zone, and I don't know the technicalities of it. She obviously does, but it's fascinating what the result is.
Yeah, and I mean, you've come a long way since Shruti on. I think you understand more than you admit, but yeah, I feel like we're in a really important place right now in terms of trying to imagine forward and create the tools that people are going to need in this future that really is new every day, really.
Yep. So now, as we get closer to the end of our episode here, I have some questions I want to ask you that hopefully will be part of all of our broadcasts. So we kind of get people's perspectives on a few issues. And I want to start with, we've talked a lot about the future and about sustainability and kind of where we were and where we're going. Looking forward, tell me, what are you most optimistic about and what are you most pessimistic about when it comes to sustainability and the world we live in?
That is a great question. What I'm most optimistic about, and this is an easy one for me, is I do feel like there is such a incredible amount of innovation happening right now that in the future, we are going to have solutions to huge problems that are desperately needed. And I'll just give you some examples. I think that innovation will help us to restore coral reefs. I think that innovation will help us to capture carbon in a very clean and safe way. I think in the future, we will have renewable energy at our fingertips. So all those things make me incredibly optimistic because those are examples of things that we desperately need. The question of what makes me pessimistic, it's the same other side of it is we don't have a lot of time. We really don't. And moving people in the right direction can take a long time. And I don't think right now that our political conversations or even our media conversations are helping us all move, and see, the same facts and the same needs and all of that. So it's, how do we get people just speaking the same language again about something that concerns us all? We all want clean air. We all want clean water. We all want a livable planet for our grandkids and beyond. We just don't, our actions, there's a gap between knowing and doing. And how do we close that gap? It's scary how slow we're doing that. If we're doing it at all, I'm not even sure. So that's that. I mean, we are trying our best, but I'm saying it can't be, hand to hand. We got to do this at scale and we got to do it fast. And we need our political leaders and our business leaders and our teachers and citizens, stop arguing about things and just agree on some of the most important things.
Yeah, well, if you can solve that, there's a Nobel Prize in it for you. At second part.
Yeah, but the metaphor of the frog in the boiling water, that's where we are. And at a certain temperature, people won't be able to, deny or, obfuscate. And at that point, it probably will be so scary. And this is getting dark, and that's not my intention. All I'm saying is we will have innovations for that if we have the time, if we have enough time to implement them and enough wherewithal and, consensus to.
Yeah. Well, very good answers.
Yeah.
The next question, or the second question, which is the last question, is what book, film, documentary, what have you seen or read that you would recommend to folks to kind of really give them a picture of where we are in the world and where we can be going? Is there something out there or a couple of things that you'd recommend?
A lot of things come to mind, but one in particular that I would recommend to everyone is a book which really came from good people coming together as volunteers, actually. It's a book called The Carbon Almanac. Foreword is by Seth Godin, who a lot of people will know is a legendary marketing mind and best-selling author. But this was a citizen project. It's takes you through, specific to carbon, a lot of the most important facts, not at all politicized. It is also very, very digestible. So everything is kind of, 30 seconds to a minute read, and then you can go on to another topic, and it just really does a nice job. So it's called The Carbon Almanac, and I'm sure it's at your local library or bookstore, but you can get it wherever you get your books.
Well, we'll put that in the link. We'll put the notes to some of the things that we've talked about so folks who listen can kind of check it out. But that's great. Look at Craig. It's been a great 45 minutes chatting with you. This is the first of many to come. We will have you again. We have some amazing guests lined up moving forward. And any parting words that you'd like to say on this gigantic audience that I'm sure we'll have here?
Just to say, I wish that we could turn the tables as well, because you are a very good podcast host, but you're also a very good podcast guest. And so maybe in the not distant future, I can interview you.
Well, you are definitely, as the co-founder, on deck to be a host. So you're one of the hosts too. So we can turn the tables anytime. Listen, to everyone out there, you've been listening to the Future Shapers podcast, brought to you by the Spaceship. Craig and I are always willing to engage with any of you. If you want to reach out to us, please check our website, TheSpaceship.ai. It is being built. It'll be better and better every time you look at it, but it's already there. So take a look and reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. For that, signing off. Everybody take care, and we'll see and hear and talk to you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Todd.